Welcome, everybody. We're reaching the top of the hour. Thanks for joining tonight. We'll give a few more minutes for people to be able to log in. If you haven't already, go ahead and participate in our poll there. It's always interesting to see what roles in the practice are interested in each of these topics. That helps us develop future topics. Definitely throughout the presentation, if you think of a topic that you'd really like to see us present, go ahead and throw that into the chat box so that we know, because we love to do these events and help everybody get some CE out there, especially with all the conferences going on hold. So, all right, I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes with that poll on the screen, and then we will go ahead and get started so that we stay nice and on time with tonight and get you back to hanging out with your cats and dogs for the rest of the evening after this. Right now, 66% of our audience is veterinarians. I'll share the results on the screen here shortly. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to close that poll and share the results. So we have 65% veterinarians, 22% technicians, and 9% academia and other. That's always very interesting. If you haven't checked out your chat box yet, you have a chat box there. And what that does is send a message into us, and that stays private between you and our moderator tonight. So that doesn't go to the whole crowd. So if you want to practice using that chat box, go ahead and do that. Here, I wanted to make sure you knew there was an actual person behind the event tonight. I'm Claire Pickens. I'll be your presenter tonight. I am with Thrive. I'm the Senior Director of Operations. And my history in this industry goes back a while. Like many of us, I started when I was a teenager. I actually started in equine reproduction on an Arab farm, helping with artificial insemination and all of the fun stuff that comes with a reproductive farm for equine. I then transitioned to small animal when I went to college for engineering, of all things, and actually just fell in love with veterinary medicine at that point in small animals. So I actually did not finish that engineering degree. I transitioned into small animal completely and ended up being the co-founder and non-DVM owner of a practice from 2005 to 2017. And in that time period, I earned finished my degree in human resources and earned a CVPM, a SHRM certified professional certification, Six Sigma, fear-free, and I'm finishing the executive MBA now. So I have a little addiction to acronyms, if you can't tell. So lots of those after the name, but what's important is lots of time in the veterinary industry in the hospital to hear a lot of conversations. So what we're going to cover tonight is hospital culture and the importance of appropriate conversations. Given the background that I've just given you about myself, my perspective is not just having been a leader in a veterinary hospital for a very long time and having had to moderate and resolve a lot of conversations, but also from the perspective of an HR professional. So my education is actually more focused on human resources than it is anything else. So you'll hear a mixed perspective there between actually being in veterinary hospitals most of my life and also between what will keep things fairly HR straight and keep people out of trouble. So I'm going to drop off of camera now. Christine Markoulis will be in the chat box with you tonight. If you'd like to practice using that chat box, go ahead and throw in there the city and state that you're from. I'm actually located in Orlando, Florida. We have, though I am part of the national leadership team, we work remotely. So it's very cool to always see where people are from around the country. This makes the world a lot smaller when we do web presentations. So thank you for joining tonight. I'm going to go ahead and jump into my presentation here. I'm going to drop off of camera so that the presentation fills the screen. Christine, if you could just let me know if the correct screen is showing when the screen shares. It should be the full screen of hospital culture, appropriate workplace conversations. So hopefully we are good there. All right.
You are looking good.
All right, well, I'm going to drop off camera here. And just to let you know where people are from, we've got some Ohio, Colorado, Texas, Georgia, Nebraska, California, Iowa, Mississippi. Fantastic. Nebraska, New York. I think we've hit all the time zones. So that is fantastic. All right, so tonight, hospital culture, appropriate workplace conversations. This can be a really tricky one, whether you're in management or not. I'd like to preface this presentation by saying everybody is an equal contributor to workplace conversations. It is not just the job of management to lead the initiative here. Everybody is an equal contributor, and they can either contribute to the positive, middle ground, or to the negative. So I would like, as we go through this presentation, that you kind of do more of a self-assessment than an assessment of your leadership, because that typically will turn out with better long-term results for your own contribution to this particular topic. This one can be a little bit more personal than other topics. So tonight we're going to go through some key areas. We're going to first address the fine line and the complexity of context. When it comes to the world of HR, context means everything. And sometimes when a story is retold, that changes. We're going to talk about the different avenues of workplace conversation, maybe more avenues than you think. We're going to address workplace gossip. That's usually a pretty popular slide. Examples of inappropriate conversations, examples of appropriate conversations that drive culture, applying EQ to the individual contribution to the workplace conversations, how those shape the hospital culture, and there's some tips and tools to help individuals contribute to that great workplace conversation. A culture is a team event. It's not based on just one person. So it really is a group of people making some sort of contribution to an overall culture. And while one person can attempt to influence that, it really takes everybody in the environment to influence it. So I hope as we go through here, you take some notes on how you can be a cultural influencer and help build cultures that people really want to come to work and be there and have a great time. So let's do this defining context. I put a quote up here from a very interesting HR article. The reference is listed right down there at the bottom. And it's actually an article about jokes and lewd conversations in the workplace and where's the line. And it's got some great examples in that article. So if you like to do a little extra reading, this presentation will be available to you on the website afterwards in form of PDF. So you can look up that article and read about the difference between what might seem funny and takes out of context, it's not really funny, and then somebody calls HR. So context when it comes to a workplace conversation is the deciding factor of what falls on what line of that magical word harassment. And that is a really important distinction when you're talking about the concept of people, what gets documented, because harassment, I think most people would consider as a fairly serious word. So it's a distinction, though, that's really difficult to articulate and harder to prove, because typically by the time something gets elevated to somebody else to make that distinction, the story isn't told the same way, nor is it told with the same level of passion or in the same context. Sometimes words are left out or changed, or sometimes the emotions have changed. And it's really difficult to contextualize those things and make a fair determination of harassment after the fact. So I would encourage you, as you think about the different areas that are considered appropriate and inappropriate, the difference between what could be funny one day and potentially out of context the next, and not to put an over cautionary tale on what's said in the workplace, but it may make you stop and do a survey of the environment first before particular jokes or particular statements or things like that are said, or particular themes of conversation are done, because context can be really, really difficult. In the world of HR, particularly in the academic world of HR, it's a topic that's brought up a lot, because when you go to document something, if you write down that word harassment, things are taken to a different place. So here's the avenues of conversation. You might not think of these as traditional avenues, but once you have a workplace relationship, somebody has become your coworker, there's a few different ways that conversation can happen. The obvious ones are in person, on break room or lunch, It's been interesting to me over my career how many times people see the break room as kind of like a cone of silence, even though it's not really a cone of silence. We all know that. So think about it like that you're not really outside the building, and sometimes it's better to just kind of wait until you're not in the workplace at all before you have particular conversations. Lunch, regardless of clock in, clock out status, lunch doesn't necessarily mean you've left the workplace. With clients, sometimes clients, and boy, I bet we could all tell a funny story in this area. Sometimes clients start telling stories that get a little too personal and they cross a couple of barriers and across a couple of lines. Vendors can do the same thing. I actually think back to some examples, and I had at one point in my career that one of the companies was the husband and another different company, these were major vendors, was a husband-wife pair, and they got a divorce in the time that they were serving the practice. Boy, did that get personal. They needed to vent, and they chose to do it with people that they served, that they considered friends, and that went left a little bit quicker than it should have. So that's another spot to think about. And at conferences, casual environments, it also can happen digitally. And I really want to call out this particular category: text, email, official records, workplace social media, photos. What I mean by official records is the patient record in most cases. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this, but have you ever written a note in a record that then got printed out and the client saw it? Yikes, that can be tough. So making sure that what we write in those records stays within the realm of professionalism, and it's written in a way that literally anybody could see it and it wouldn't cross that line of context. Though sometimes emotional situations arise, you have to think about a way to word it so it doesn't cross that line of context. But what I really want to call out in this particular category is that it's not passing, it's written. Once it's texted, once it's emailed, once it's written down, once it's on social media, it's recorded. So think about workplace conversation. If you thought of the entire concept as being a patient record, as soon as you put it in writing, you can't not have it in writing. You can't delete it when it gets to the other end. So take that part a little more seriously than you would take anything else, because you can't take it away once it happens. Sometimes conversations, you can ask for forgiveness, it goes away, it just fades away. The electronic stuff sticks around. That's on record. And then after our social gatherings, personal social media, holiday parties, this is why a lot of companies have really put some caution around the type of activities that are done as a company, because sometimes they get to a place that people say things that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise said to their coworkers, and that ends up impacting the work environment. Gossip. Well, goodness, who doesn't love a good gossip, right? Well, here's the thing. Gossip, most of us think, refers to malicious or something actionable. Like, oh my gosh, did you see what she was wearing? Or did you see that client? Or did you smell them? They smelled terrible. Those kind of things are what people traditionally think of when they think of gossip. When it comes to human resources, that's not actually the definition. The definition is really just talking on behalf of somebody else about something that's their business. So I'm going to give an example here that happened within my own career that actually took a bit of unwinding to resolve the situation. And that was that somebody who did not know that she had not announced it to the rest of the staff announced somebody else's pregnancy. Hey, did you know? I'm so excited for her. And it wasn't even done in a malicious way. It was oh, I'm so excited for her. Did you know she's pregnant? Well, from an HR perspective, that person wasn't ready to make that announcement. That was something that was a private conversation between two people, and somebody else announcing that on her behalf, that became the HR definition of gossip. So we want to be really careful that when we are doing things, even if it's not malicious, even if it's done with good intent, that in general, you're only sharing information about yourself when you're talking in the workplace, and that you allow people to just share their own newsreel. Let them make their own breaking news, let them share their own information. Otherwise, it can fall into this category of gossip, and it doesn't even need to be something that was meant to do. That's another one that this falls into is, hey, this person haven't even arrived to work yet, or do we know what's always happening? He's always late. Well, you may not know all of the context behind that. And while that may seem like a fairly benign statement, it actually is setting the reputation of that person in the environment. So that would be more appropriate to then go to that person's leader, supervisor, manager, whoever that person might be, and say, hey, I'm a little concerned about so-and-so. Is there anything that I can do to help, or have you already been addressing this? And that would be the more discreet way, instead of talking about that with other people in the work environment. So down at the bottom of that screen there's the impact of gossip. It builds a lack of trust in the environment. Any conversation that's happening about those things is taking away from conversation that can happen about patients and pets. So if you think of it from that perspective, it's lost time. It's lowered productivity. It causes rumors. Rumors lead to anxiety, hurt feelings, reputation damage. Sometimes when that damage happens, sometimes it's repairable, sometimes it's not repairable. It also causes one of the worst things, which is people feeling like they need to choose sides. And that causes a divide in the environment that can sometimes be really difficult to repair. And I'm sure many of us have been in environments where that actually caused somebody to be removed from the environment because that couldn't be repaired. So what I'm asking here in this particular slide is just kind of think about the ripple effect. So instead of thinking it as traditional gossip, it's the ripple effect of one thing said could lead to 2 or 3 other cause and effect things that happen in the environment that were not intended. So whether it was good intent to start, it doesn't always end up good at the end. So just let people share their own news, and generally this won't be an issue. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on this slide because I prefer to focus on the positive than on the items that are overtly and clearly items that we've probably already heard about at some point in our career as inappropriate conversations. Weight and appearance, jokes and pokes, religion, health and mental health, partying and social behaviors, money, income, finance, and then your work conflict or disagreement with anybody else in the environment. So when it comes to these categories, these are just categories that are a little bit riskier than others. One of the most common questions that I've gotten on this particular slide is, well, shoot, these are the topics that come up when you're getting to know somebody. So how do you talk to people in your work environment? Because, well, inadvertently, you're going to probably talk about their religion, or they may have had an issue with their health and they might talk about it. So let's refer back to that last slide. Let them talk about it themselves. So one of the examples, and there's a reference here at the bottom as well to an article, the Inappropriate Conversation Topics at training.com. Great website. They have a lot of good references there. One of the examples they gave for weight and appearance was very interesting, is that they said that somebody said, wow, your skin looks like it's really clearing up. Well, that person had never talked about their skin previously. And in the example, they showed how that instantly made that person pretty self-conscious that people may have been looking at their skin prior to that. So while it came across as a compliment, it also was like what we might refer to as a backhanded compliment, that your skin was kind of not so great before this and it looks a whole lot better now. So just think about how somebody might take that if it had not already been a topic of conversation that they originated themselves. So it's really important here with these conversations is that we need to make sure that we're not bringing up a topic that catches people by surprise, and that as we're getting to know people, it's totally appropriate to set boundaries on the topics that you feel would be good or not good for your working relationship. The one that comes up quite often in that area might be health or mental health, and that people need somebody to talk to. Sometimes they need a friend in the work environment, which is totally fine. You just have to put some guardrails on the when and the where. So the when and the where may be appropriate more on a lunch break, or maybe after work. If you want to be the friend in the workplace, it might not be the best time to be doing that over a patient while you're drawing blood, or sometimes the surgery room can turn into a counseling center. I know that we've all experienced that. So you just want to make sure that you are setting some boundaries on the where and the when if you are open to these type of conversations, or you might need to set some boundaries altogether on that. That said, make sure you're not setting yourself up to be the person that's crossing those boundaries too often. One of the examples I'd like to use in this area is I've worked with some brilliant people over my lifetime in this industry, really smart people. And there was one in particular who probably one of the most talented people I've worked with, who had a really lively social life. And she posted about it pretty frequently on social media and was friends with everybody at work on social media. What that led to was a very skewed image of who she is as a person and as a medical professional. So be careful about if you have a life outside of work that's pretty lively and you'd like to be able to keep that life private, then a lot of HR professionals would recommend not necessarily mixing the work and the social life, and maybe not being intermingled like that on social media. That can be a difficult conversation, but it also can be reputation setting or image setting, so it might be good to keep those areas separate. Probably the last one I'll address on this screen is the jokes and pokes. It's sometimes fun to use sarcasm and to poke, and particularly if somebody seems like they're a good sport. If you're a person who likes to joke, I would just suggest occasionally asking that person privately and to the side, is it crossing the line? Am I joking too much? Or you can also just, if that person has crossed the line, if you're not that person and somebody else is the jokester, it's totally appropriate to say it's starting to sting a little bit, and have them kind of back off of that. This comes up a lot when somebody ends up being kind of that person in the environment that doesn't mind the sarcasm and the joke. But if you really read articles about this, very often that person goes home and has a little bit of like, ouch, that's starting to hurt a little bit, and they don't tell anybody. So that's something to just make sure that people are really well aware. That comes into the EQ that we'll talk about a little bit later, that you're just really aware of how you impact the environment and how the environment is impacting you, and be proactive about putting up some barriers or some guardrails, or having those difficult conversations before it gets past that point that it can feel uncomfortable. So let's switch over to the positive, because that's so much more fun. How do you build great cultures? Well, you build great cultures in some pretty key areas: contribution, encouragement, individuality, humanizing things, having fun together, professional growth opportunities, and recognition. These are the essential areas of building great cultures and great environments. So workplace contribution and professional growth kind of go hand in hand. It's great to assign people as subject matter experts in the environment, so that what you're talking about, and you're intentionally building conversation that is around a common interest. We're in one of those fields that has an unlimited amount of incredibly cool information about science, new developments. We're so fortunate to be in an industry that always has new advancements. And that what that gives us is the opportunity to build very intentional conversations about a new study that may have come out, or a new product that was released, or something that might be being done in a different country that, well, why isn't the US doing it yet? Or why is that other country doing it? Or whatever it may be, this industry offers us so many opportunities to have cool conversations about what's going on. So with those two in particular, if you can be a driver of that, you will be a driver of a positive culture. Encouraging other people, that goes a really long way. So I'd like to kind of mix that also with professional growth. If you can be that person that helps people set skill goals, ask them what they want to learn. And if you're in a position that you can teach somebody, that's a great culture builder right there. Help people learn a new skill. If you're in the position that you want to learn something and you can find a mentor to partner with, that all in itself in an environment is building that culture where you are driving the right type of conversation in the culture. So those go hand in hand. If you're a student, find your teacher. If you're a teacher, find your student. That partnership is essential to a great culture. I know it's kind of cool when we all wear matching scrubs, but we do need to make sure that we don't try to treat each other like clones. Aside from the veterinary industry, my other primary career has been as a coach, as an athletic coach in track and field and basketball. And I teach a different class on coaching skills and analyzing your lineup, and I bring up this concept a lot. Everybody doesn't play the same position on a team. Everybody doesn't have the same cultural contribution. Some people are more quiet. Some people are more outspoken. Some are more intellectual. Some are more charismatic. Some can do incredibly complex medical procedures and understand medical terminology. And some are better at resolving customer issues and customer complaints and really bringing that element of welcome here to the environment. So really looking at your peers and looking at them from a talent perspective has such an impact on the culture. It's very, very tempting sometimes to look and go, well, why can't they do that? Why can't they learn that? Why can't they be like that person? Or to want to clone people in the environment. I'd like to encourage you here that when you go to work, the next day that you go to work, look around and intentionally look for what people are good at. Individualize them for their assets. And it really changes the perspective on the culture, and you start building on those assets and building on their contribution to the environment. Building skills is not that difficult when you can engage the person in a relationship that helps both people. So look for those assets. And something I say in the coaching seminars is that if everybody was the quarterback, we'd have a pretty boring and unproductive team. Nobody would be running for the goal line. We would have a bunch of clones, and that really wouldn't work very well at all. So if you think about anything you like to watch, and if you cloned one person and made them the whole team, it wouldn't work. So individuality is incredibly important in a work environment to keep the culture alive. Have fun. Arts and crafts are amazing to do that. Potluck. Maybe I saw on the 4th Be With You, a lot of people came to work with Princess Leia hair or did something fun, Yoda ears. And that really helps kind of humanize the environment. On the topic of humanizing, I think we need to address that most of this industry is now a group-owned setting. And what I mean by that is there's some sort of corporate structuring to where we work. And that is something that is relatively young to this industry. There's other industries that that's all they've known. If you've worked at a Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Best Buy, those are heavily corporate, and the people that have been in those industries have been extremely used to a heavily corporatized atmosphere. Veterinary medicine, not so much. We've been used to more of a family atmosphere, and it can be kind of a transition to have that kind of corporatized or scaled feel. Sometimes it even has an impact on culture because people feel like others are making decisions for them and they want buy-in in that. And it can be a tough transition. But if you've worked outside of this industry, you could be that person that helps humanize that in this culture, in your corporate culture, to say, you know what, though, we can still make a great culture in this environment, regardless of the number of locations that might be attached to whatever we're doing. So that you do that by potentially taking things that maybe there's a poster on the wall that has particular words, and you might hear leadership teams, or you might see it in emails, or you might see these words and you might say, those are just corporate words. You can take those corporate words, because most of them are actually built on amazing foundations, and they were developed by people that really felt that they would truly help the environments. You can take those corporate words and put them in your own words, and you can see like, okay, so the intent here was to build a great culture. It wasn't to make those words mundane or overused. So that takes each individual to do that, regardless of the size of the practice you're in or the size of the group of practices you're in. It does take each individual to translate corporate speak into regular speak and make it a natural environment that's built on the individuals that are there, not really thinking about scale or size or corporate. It's about your individual environment. And then recognition. I mean, I don't know about, you can put it in the chat box if you do, but man, I really think a nice good morning, thank you, have a great day. Every once in a while, you realize people are going through a tough time in their own life, and just making it to work and putting their best foot forward, or maybe speaking for myself here, working through knee pain or lower back pain to still lift those big dogs and get through the day. Or there's really nothing worse than when you're having a bad day personally, and then a client makes it just a little bit worse, it takes a lot to power through all of that. It takes a lot to get the focus and to still remain a positive part of a team through all of that. So a little recognition for that, and just giving somebody a attaboy at the end of the day when they've pushed through, and you can tell that they've pushed through, that makes a big difference in an environment. As well as if somebody, if that's that person that said, hey, I have like a science thing I want to talk about, or hey, I read this thing, or I watched a video and I want to talk about it, and you appreciate that, then tell them, thanks for your contribution today. That was great. It was a welcome in the environment to start that conversation. So this screen right here is the big takeaway tonight, because it really focuses in on being a key contributor to the right topics in the environment. And when you go to work every day with an intentionality behind being a person that contributes in one of these areas, it doesn't have to be all of them all day. You could say, this month I'm going to work on this, next month I'm going to work on that. But when you go to work intentionally seeking to contribute in this way, it's amazing how different the perspective can be, because that's contagious. Just like negativity is contagious, positivity is also contagious. So hopefully, if you are not currently a contributor, hopefully this encourages you to be a contributor to a positive culture. And if you'd like to just spread the joy at your environment, then hopefully that will help you do that as well. So let's talk about EQ and the application of emotional intelligence to this. In the last, I'd say 5 to 7 years, EQ has been a very, very popular topic, not just in this industry, but I'd say in every industry. Did a little bit of time, well, that sounded a little bit like prison, but that's not the case. I did a little bit of time as a corporate speaker and traveled the country speaking to multiple industries. And this is one of the most popular topics out there, this and having difficult conversations. And it's really not complicated. As many seminars as there are that are, 4, 8, 10 hours, 3 days, 5 days a week. And it is absolutely fascinating to dive into this topic and really, really understand the psychology behind how important it is. It is also so simple that you could learn it today and apply it tomorrow. It's really just 4 things: self-management, relationship management, self-awareness, and social awareness. These things will build and maintain amazing relationships, whether you're at work or with your friends or with your partner or wherever you are. You could be at the grocery store. This will help you out. Self-management is just managing your own actions to create better outcomes. Self-awareness is understanding your personal contribution to the environment. Relationship management is understanding the role you personally play in the relationships you have with others. And social awareness is being aware of the environment and how people are being impacted. So that's that ability to step back, look at the environment and go, oh, so this is what's really happening and I can help, or I can contribute, or maybe there's somebody I need to talk to fix something that may not actually be that difficult to fix. So what you couldn't see when I turned on my camera earlier is that I'm 6 feet tall. I like to use this example because it is a real life example, and though it seems a little silly on the surface, it's actually been something that that has made a huge difference. So I noticed very early on in leadership that when I was standing and having a conversation with somebody, it was very different than when I was sitting and having a conversation with somebody, especially if there was more than a 6-inch height disparity between the two people. It made a big difference whether there was a table in the middle or not a table in the middle. People seemed to be much more receptive to the conversation if we were both sitting, and that was because we were both at the same eye level. So I noticed that probably 15, 20 years ago, that really impacted my self-awareness of what I was bringing to the conversation. That can apply in so many different ways. So after I noticed that about myself, I started kind of looking at, well, how are other people impacted by these things? So I started to notice that some people stand really, really close when they talk to people. And if they just took one step back, it made people feel a little bit more comfortable. That could be a cultural thing, that could be a whatever it is. I don't know what feeling that person is feeling on the receiving end, but just those little things can make such a big difference. Now, here we are in the time of social distancing, That's made an even bigger difference. If you step into somebody's bubble these days, it immediately impacts them. So while this seems like kind of a superficial example, it's really not, because people are very sensitive about their space. So where you choose to talk to people, if you're going to have a more serious conversation, makes a difference, whether that's inside the break room or at the table that's behind the practice, or maybe it's a different location altogether. Maybe you just go offsite altogether. These things make a big difference. The tone, some people really don't react well to tonal changes in voice. Some people do like it. Some people see it as a sign of passion. So when you notice that about other people, clients, friends, family, partners, coworkers, and you start making mild modifications to how you're doing things, it's not to change yourself for any other reason than to improve the relationship. It's really just self-management. It's just really understanding where you fit and how you're going to get the best result from that conversation. Some people see this as, well, I don't want to change myself for anybody. That's not the point. The point is to get the best results you can out of any conversations that you have. So emotional intelligence, I would encourage you to look into it if you have not already, but it is an incredibly complex topic that can also be so simple that you could do this tomorrow and have great output. So I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I'm going to go ahead and keep going. If you have questions, though, go ahead and throw them in there. Oh, there we go. We've got one that just popped in there now. I have a fellow basketball player in the group here. That's fantastic. Yeah, I have also found the example in the box is a fellow athlete here, and I have found that there's a commonality in people that have had certain life journeys, and one of those in athletes tends to be a level of assertiveness that can come across in well, the word that I've heard a lot in life is intimidating. It can come across as intimidating. So that can happen if you have a very high level of education and you can speak at a different level or speak to a different depth, or you can feel much more confident in the message that you're delivering. That could be because you were an athlete in your past. Like I can relate with that a lot because, well, I was coached for most of my life. Go get it, get what you want, be there, be assertive, show up. Well, that doesn't always match with the other person on the other side. That's where emotional intelligence can really change the perspective. And as you begin to talk or even reach out your hand, I don't know if any of you have ever hand shook with somebody that's a hand crusher, but even things like that, they say there's that handshake that you can't even feel. Whichever side of the spectrum you're on, there's nothing wrong with the side of the spectrum that you're on. But I would encourage you to kind of experiment with that to see if you get a different reaction out of the other end. And that's how you start implementing EQ, to be able to make that change in that relationship where you just get a different level of receptiveness. So that could be with a client in the explanation of what's happening. Experiment with some words. When you start to see their guard come down, you know you've hit the right level. If you don't see the guard come down, you might have to step it up a notch or step it down a notch, or you know what, somebody else might be a better person to explain it. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes a different personality is a better approach. Yes, so there's a question in the box about sympathy and empathy to dissolve gossip pretty quickly. Yes, absolutely. And if you're not familiar with sympathy and empathy and the definition there, empathy is truly putting yourself in that person's shoes because maybe you've actually been there or really feeling what they're feeling. Sympathy is feeling for them. You might not totally be able to relate to what they're going through, but it's irrelevant. You're going to be very caring to your approach in helping them get through and just being sensitive to their feelings with that. So yeah, gossip can pretty much be dissolved by putting yourself in that other person's shoes. The example I gave earlier with divulging somebody's pregnancy to the crowd, if that person would have just stopped for a second and gone, I wonder what it would feel like if somebody divulged my pregnancy, I should probably check with her first. That could have completely stopped that situation. So you're correct, absolutely correct. Yes, and I agree. There is a comment in the box, intimidation is a side effect of overachievement. Yep, that's right. And we're all in a medical field, which means we're learning constantly, and it is a side effect of overachievement. Something that I think about every day, that I thought about every day in practice, is that while we go through the same experience all day long, so we get like almost more assertive as the day goes on. You start the day fresh, you start the week fresh, right? And the client number one gets the best version of you. After you've done wellness appointment number 20, you're at the end of the day, you just want to get the message across. For the client, that's their first visit with you in the day. For you, that's your 20th visit in the day. So it's a little different for you. There's a difference in the level of perception of the information, the speed at which it's delivered, the speed at which it's received. So I've noticed over the course of my career that there's something that happens around 3 o'clock in the afternoon that changes the personality of visits. So having a little EQ in the environment and having an accountability partner, a buddy that's like, hey, we've hit that 3 o'clock hump, and let's, every client from this point forward, let's start over like we just started the morning, because we all get a little bit fatigued by the end of the day. So yes, I agree. Well-timed breaks to recharge, absolutely. And well-timed is different for everybody. Some people like to power through, some people like to just take a break once an hour, and that may mean just being quiet. And that doesn't necessarily mean leaving the hospital. They just may need to have a moment where they're not speaking to other people, or they just need to recharge a bit. So on the impact on culture, there's some very negative impacts when this kind of effort isn't put forth by everybody. And there's very positive impacts that happen when there's enough people in the environment that decide that they're going to be influencers and make that change. The negative impacts are distrust, people get disengaged, it becomes a very off-putting or uncomfortable environment. You just can't get as much done because people aren't talking about the right things. The worst thing that happens is you lose great people. Some people just don't want to stick around to see if people are going to change, so you end up losing somebody that's really important in the environment. Or poor focus. I'm sure we've all been a part of seeing medical mistakes happen when people don't have their focus in the right place. Hardly ever or never really have I seen it be by intention. This is just when you're distracted and your focus is somewhere else and your emotions are somewhere else. The one that pays is the patient. So it's really pretty important for people to keep their focus in the right place. And then the positive side is that you end up having a very trusting environment, a place where people are actively looking to collaborate and intertwine for the benefit of the patient. Because I think we all got into this so that we could focus on the patient, and then we get into the industry and we realize there's an awful lot of people here. So we've got to figure out the people thing, because if we figure out the people thing, the pets are the ones that benefit from that. You end up having a very welcoming environment. I've actually been in environments where I've seen the cultural change happen, and it feels like somebody flipped on a light switch or opened the shades and the sunlight finally came in. It just feels different. If you've ever experienced something like that, throw that into the chat box, because it really does feel different when a cultural shift happens and people start engaging in the positive side of things. Super much more productive when you have a culture that's working well together. Great people stick around, and you become a learning environment. So instead of focusing on topics that don't really make anybody smarter, you end up focusing on topics that benefit the patient and do make people smarter. Christine, do we have any questions in the chat box that I should get to?
We just have a couple ones. I figured you could probably answer them at the end. They're kind of trending along the same topic.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds fair. I can get that to the end. All right, some tips and tools. The next slide is just references. So tips and tools, and then I'll answer some questions or go over some individual scenarios there. So first is take personal accountability for your contribution to the workplace. At some point, sometimes people think it's a singular leader's responsibility to repair this in the environment. And if you really think about the reality of that, if each person just kind of personally takes charge of their own bubble and their own self-management, then it can start to have a positive ripple effect. And then you're just really asking for partnership with people rather than asking for monumental changes or for one person to be that big of an influencer and change everybody. Understand who to talk to and how to report inappropriate conversations. So if things do cross the line, it's pretty important to know who to talk to about that. Sometimes it's valuable to talk to a coworker about something that's going on. Sometimes it's not. So whoever that person is in your environment that you would go to typically to talk about, reporting theft or reporting anything else like that, go to that person and bring this topic up and say, so what do I do when something just kind of crosses the line and I don't really know what to do with it? Who do I talk to about that? And you can start developing an understanding in your environment of the things that are good to talk to teammates about, and then the things that maybe aren't so good to talk to teammates about that might broach that line of gossip or reputation management. Don't try to save the world all at once. Cultural transformations take very much a collaborative effort, and they take a lot of planning. They actually don't just happen without intention. You need to be very intentional about where the focus will be, where the shift will take place. Each person needs to engage in that. Over the time of doing some speaking in corporate America, when a company tries to do a cultural transformation, I don't care if the company has 20 people or 500 people, depending on what needs to happen in that environment, you usually make a 6 to 9 month plan. It's not a short plan. It's not a, hey, in the next 30 days, we're just gonna flip a switch and it's gonna be wonderful. It's an incremental focus on different things to build a different environment, because it takes a lot of habits to create a certain environment, and it takes intentional acts to change those habits and build a different type of environment. So be patient and look at the big picture. And if you're in a position to be an influencer on making some positive cultural changes, then understand that that takes time. It's not instantaneously happening. And just keep in mind that people that professionally do this and professionally plan this for other companies, they write 6 to 9 months plans, 9-month plans. So when you keep that in mind, sometimes it keeps things in perspective so that you don't think, well, they should be able to fix this in the next 30 days or I'm out of here. That's not necessarily the best way to think about this. It takes a lot of effort and sometimes some fairly large changes and a lot of small changes to make it happen. So that really depends on the gradient of where a culture currently is to know how much effort it's going to take to resolve that. Lots of great books out there about that. There's also a lot of great organizations that have this topic as a highlighted topic. VHMA, the Veterinary Hospital Managers Association, has been one of my favorite for this because they have a lot of blogs and forums that people can interact in. You don't have to be a hospital manager to be a part of that organization. You can be other roles in the hospital. There's a lot of people that join that just so that they can be a part of those conversation boards. The American Association of State Veterinary Boards, you can actually search in there for topics, and culture is a pretty popular topic, so you can kind of search and see who providers are on that and if there's any upcoming events or publicly listed events. Big fan of Society for Human Resource Management. They have some things that are free to view on their site, and then there's some other things that are only available to HR professionals, but even if you just sign up for their newsletter, you'll get a lot. I would say the vast majority of their newsletters are on the topic of culture and workplace balance and difficult conversations. Only if you sign up for the membership itself, then you get all the really super fun stuff like policy change and all that, but the regular newsletters is pretty robust. AVMA has made this a pretty big topic as well as NAPTA, because it's impacting all of us. Vendor programs have also been very popular. I've seen, I know Zoetis has a huge learning site. It's called VetVance, and it's free. You can sign up for that, and inside of there, you pick your hospital role, and you can go through a number of completely free sessions that are meant to be focused on your hospital role. Everything from communication to, there's a lot of communication. There's some practice management in there. And Covetris has that as well, and a number of other vendor programs have that as well. And then if you are not already signed up for a bunch of veterinary practice publications, there's a ton that are free. Today's Veterinary Business, Today's Veterinary Nurse, There's DVM 360. There's just so many out there that are completely free. You can get print or digital, and keep learning about these topics. All right. Yes, you can. Let me just kind of filter through here and see what we've got. Yeah, I'm gonna put the PowerPoint of this next to the recording that'll be on our website, so thrivevet.com/learning. And you'll notice that we have a few presentations that we've provided the PowerPoint, so I'll put this there. This is a good one to do staff meetings about. Warning, this is a bit much to present in hospital, so you might want to take this one and bite size it down. It could become 3 presentations pretty easily, particularly if it's to a culture that needs some repair. So use a little caution with that one. Yeah, so I see a comment in here about corporate veterinary takeover. So interestingly enough, I'm glad you brought that up, because as a practice owner for so many years, when I went to sell the practice, it was traumatic for me. So I absolutely understand what you're talking about there, to speak about the practice in terms of nothing but numbers. And the company that I chose to sell to, I sold to them because they spoke about the practice in terms of people and not totally in numbers. But I know that's not the case for every purchasing entity. So, so that can be a really big dramatic change. You'll have to support each other a lot in that. Just remember that the area leaders that are chosen for a lot of those organizations are still people. So this is a very valid conversation to bring up and say, I just need a little help getting through this transition. I'm not used to speaking about my environment in terms of numbers. That's new. I'm not used to a metric driving so much of our conversations. So don't be afraid to approach that particular conversation, because that's something that a lot of people go through when a cultural transformation happens. And you don't, even though there's more numbers involved, you don't necessarily have to let those numbers drive the culture. The people still drive the culture. Yes, let's see. So we've got, how do you navigate light topics like TV shows during important procedures? Yeah, isn't that just the case? It's very common that the surgical suite turns into a counseling/chat zone. I have seen several doctors very successfully ask for a certain amount of quiet in surgery, and it's worked very, very well for them. Not in a I don't want to hear your voice, you're too chatty kind of way, but more in a, hey, when I'm doing surgery, it's just my zone. I like to be in my zone, and I like to have a certain amount of quiet. So if we can work together on that, I think it'd be great. We could probably get through surgery a little bit quicker. I haven't really seen too many people highly offended by that conversation. When they get offended is when people go for the throat and say something like, gosh, I just really can't stand you talking while I'm doing surgery. So it's all about the approach. It's all about creating the atmosphere that you like. I would definitely suggest not doing that during surgery. That conversation should not happen during surgery. That conversation should happen 2 days before the surgery day, not the morning of the surgery day, 2 days prior, so that you can kind of talk to the whole surgery team, not just the one person, but the whole surgery team, and say, so surgery's kind of that place that you just get a chance to take a break from all the conversation in the day. So is there any way that you can kind of help me with that and partner with me on that? And we just kind of listen to the sound of the beep and get through surgery, and maybe a little bit less conversation, because, well, when we get into exam rooms, we can't avoid the conversation. So that typically goes pretty well when you approach it like that. Just have to be sensitive to the other person's end. All right, let's see. Let me move. Christine, please call me out if I'm missing something. I'm trying to scroll through the box here.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple in there. One is about navigating gossip and how to kind of change that topic or navigate that situation.
All right, so gossip. Is this regarding, let's see, there's a couple of different angles that gossip comes from. So if it is a singular person that's doing that, oh, I see where you're, okay. I see where that comment is. If it's a singular person that's kind of the contributor of that to the environment, it's very appropriate to pull them aside and say that you are looking to make just some minor adjustments to the culture, and that you'd like some partnership and collaboration on some of the topics that are talked about. I've always found it a little bit more successful to go in and ask for partnership and collaboration than to pinpoint somebody at being really bad at something. If it comes across personal, the reaction is going to be not as great as if you're looking for partnership in an environment. So after you've asked for partnership and get buy-in with that individual person, then the best way, if you have gossip as a systematic problem in the environment, then you may have to have that conversation individually with each person to say, we really need to make some adjustments to the environment. We need to think about swapping some of our conversations to be a little bit more scientific or educational, or there seems to be kind of a common thread of something going on here, and I just want to see if we made some little changes, if we could change some of the topics that we're talking about, and ask for each individual's partnership in that, and just check back in with them pretty frequently. When people write cultural plans, there are very frequent check-ins. It takes a lot of work, but it's very frequent check-ins. If you're a leader, just every week, every 2 weeks, check in with people and go, so what are we talking about these days? What are the conversations about? Or have we learned something new? Have we taught something new? Typically the worst offenders in the environment, if you give them a student and ask them to teach something, you can very intentionally change their conversation and then keep giving them something to teach and to do. Now, if it's a destructive gossiper, that just needs to be addressed head on, that the conversations are not lending to the right kind of work environment. And that's a different conversation, because that's a addressing a behavior that's taking the environment the wrong way. Very private conversation. Got to make sure you're doing that at the right time of the day so that it's not going to lead to any differences in personality that could impact the clients. Or so intentional timing on that one to make sure that you're giving that person enough time to think and to respond. I don't typically suggest those conversations go past a certain time. So take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, tell the person that you want to have a 10-minute conversation about hospital culture, about conversations, everybody's contribution to that. If they trail on, those conversations become gossip all in themselves. So this is an incremental behavior change where you're taking very intentional actions to address certain behaviors in the environment. If you allow people to vent too much during those conversations themselves become contributor. So keep them short, keep the check-ins frequent, and then keep moving forward with those topics. And ask for lots of partnership and collaboration, unless and until it becomes like a major destroyer of the environment, and then that's a performance conversation to say that there is an expectation of positive contribution to the environment. I have always, when I hire people, say that in the interview, that there's an expectation of a positive contribution to the environment. And it's kind of a game changer, because then you can bring that up later and say, so in your interview, we talked about making positive contributions to the environment. So tell me how you feel like you're doing that. And it really changes. So if you're hiring people or you've had some turnover and you're bringing new people in, I would suggest making that as part of your hiring technique. And your strategy is to be intentional about asking people about their positive contribution to workplace conversations, environment, and culture. And then say, I would love to check in with you in like 30 days to see how you feel and see what you're doing, because it's really important to me that we have people that are actively and individually contributing to the environment. A little harder to do with existing employees, but when you're hiring, you can set the tone right from the start. All right.
We do have a couple more, Claire.
Okay.
There a few snuck in just a few seconds ago, but we do have one from earlier, kind of piggybacking along your comment on having those performance evaluations. We have a scenario with a staff member and a manager where the staff member was not performing up to standards, and the manager wanted to work more with this person instead of, firing them and acting upon that. However, the manager divulged feelings of the person who had brought it to her attention. How do you repair that situation once someone's divulged a third-party feeling that wasn't initially shared?
Yeah, that is tough because now lines of trust have been crossed there. It doesn't change the performance conversation though. There can be they're nearly separate and independent topics. So the performance conversation still needs to go the direction that the performance conversation goes. That doesn't mean the leader won't have to occasionally apologize for their actions in the attempt to fix things. In fact, if we're gonna go down that road, I think it's really important for new leaders or leaders that haven't had this conversation before to be very upfront with the people that they're leading and saying, I'm going to try to do this the best that I can. I need to be upfront with you that I am still working on my ability to have difficult conversations. If you are hesitant to have conversations, or you think you might make a mistake in the process, which everybody does, so that's fine. During your, if the leader tripped up, if that's what I'm understanding about that situation, and feelings were divulged, and whether that's the employee that divulged feelings or the leader that divulged feelings, that mistake is separate from the performance that was happening. One or the other of them made a human error in that situation, which is going to happen. So if you're a new leader or new to these conversations, make sure the person you're leading knows you're still working on that skill, and that's where you can ask for their partnership to say, hey, I want to do this in respect to how you're going to feel as well. There is a certain expectation though for performance, so we need to address that. But this is a difficult conversation for me too. And sometimes that can break down the barrier of people being really defensive because they think, well, the leader's a seasoned pro. There's no way they're going to make a mistake in this, or they're infallible. So the second they do make a mistake, it's difficult to recover. So put that out at the beginning, and keep those issues separate if somebody tripped up and divulged feelings in the environment in the interim. Hopefully I answered that question. If I did not, if you asked that question, get in the chat box. We'll go ahead and keep going. For those of you that need to leave because you're at the hour, I'm happy to stay on and answer questions. Your CE certificate will come to you between 24 and 48 hours after this event. So just check your email for that. That will come directly there with the program information and the program number for you to keep in your records. It only goes to the attendees of the live event. The recording, however, is available on our website. So you're welcome to watch that afterwards or present it to your staff. There just isn't CE credit for the recorded version. It's only approved for a live presentation. All right. So
I'm gonna put together a couple because they do kind of follow along the same lines. Any tips for reporting inappropriate, combative, or assaultive behaviors?
Yeah, those are deal breakers. Those are things in an environment that if you are, just put yourself in the shoes, remove yourself from your environment completely and pretend like you were the people ops office. You're the HR that's going to receive that type of information. How big of a red flag would that raise? That should tell you, if you're sitting outside the practice and you're thinking, what are the things that could put this practice at risk? What are the things that are likely to cause major complaints, board complaints, lawsuits, things like that? It's those things, assault, things that could lead to what feels like combative or violent behavior. If you're sitting in the shoes of an HR professional, they want to know about that stuff ASAP. So not in a way that is like, well, we got to get them out of here immediately, but those should be addressed. If you are leadership, that should be addressed immediately, always, to say that in the environment, everybody needs to feel safe, whether that's emotionally or physically safe. They need to feel safe, and that is of utmost priority. Keep in mind that that person you're talking to may not realize the power of their words or the power of their presence. So approach those with an understanding of that person's intent so that you can get their side of the story as well. It may not be as hard to solve as you think. You may actually just be talking to somebody who just comes across super powerful, and maybe they just didn't realize it. So it could be easier to address than you think. If you are a coworker in that situation, that is definitely something that you need to involve your leadership in and say, hey, this just isn't feeling like, it's really not feeling good. This is starting to feel a little bit combative. Combative doesn't equal patient care. So that's where those two things don't match. So this is another area where if you're sitting down with that person, you do frequent check-ins to make sure that the tone of voice is contributing to good patient care. You relate everything back to, would you talk to a client like that? Would that be good customer service communication? Sometimes we don't treat each other as well as we treat the customer. So if you can relate those things back together and say, we should really think about our customer service, internal customer service as well. That's an expectation of the job. That's an expectation of the environment. Where I see people get sticky with this is when it's the most skilled person in their environment. So people get afraid to address these things when it's the most able to do the job in their environment, so they don't want to upset that person and risk. Think about what you're doing there, though. You're allowing somebody to monopolize the environment at that point if you allow it to continue to happen, and it's going to impact your work culture. And that's almost a little bit of emotional blackmail. So you want to make sure that you address it professionally, that it's related to patient care, to customer service, to the whole workplace environment. The expectations of performance are not limited to skill. They also have a lot to do with the interactions with each other. Teamwork, it's pretty often listed in job descriptions. So if you have job descriptions, pull those out, because that can lend some help to these type of conversations to say, yeah, we do have an expectation in the environment of good teamwork, and that's impacting that. So let's see what we can do to work together to change it. I have worked with people that did not realize they came across like that. So you do need to give people some room to work on the tone of their voice, to be transparent and vulnerable with you if you're a leader, to help them work through these things and work through what I call family responses. Sometimes in a work environment, we become kind of like a family. So you listen to people start talking to each other like brothers and sisters and mothers and children and fathers, and it's how they would have responded, sometimes really abruptly, or you get so comfortable with each other, you respond as if you're at home. And that's okay if you start feeling like family, but as leaders and as coworkers, we need to recognize when that starts happening so that you can start to unravel that a little bit and go, all right, so I see we're starting to kind of react like siblings would at this point, and we need to kind of rebuild a work environment here and ask for people's partnership to do that. It's interesting how often I've experienced in my career or seen other leaders experience that when you mention that, people go, oh yeah, it does kind of feel like that. Okay, well, yeah, we need to work on this and bring it back. So just think about the approach to it so that you can approach it in a way that people can relate to it and it doesn't feel like any sort of very personalized attack on the topic.
There we got two more.
Okay.
One is regarding how do you address someone who tends to monopolize their area or specialty and doesn't really want to teach or share their knowledge in that area?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because that is going to build the workplace. So I think you just need to dive in with that person and understand the resistance to teaching. Speaking from personal experience, I think when I've come across this, it's because they just have run out of patience. They're burnt out, and they may have been asked in environments where there were a lot of people or a lot of heavy turnover. Usually there's some sort of backstory with this one where they've been overused in this capacity. Sometimes it's better to make this person a mentor of somebody else who is a better teacher. Very often the most skilled person in your environment is not the best teacher in your environment. That's the mistake a lot of people make in sometimes promoting their most skilled person into leadership. Skill doesn't always translate into training, mentoring, and leadership. So that one I would dig into and ask if they have, instead of saying, hey, why won't you teach other people in the environment? That's terrible. We need you to do that. Maybe dig in and ask, what's your history with this? Is there anything that we can do to rebuild the trust in this area? Or would you feel more comfortable? Is there a possibility that you'd be willing to produce some written materials for the team? Or do you have a list of references that you've used to get here, and start breaking down that barrier? I would think that one has a little history behind it. And then if none of those are the issue, and this person is just resistant, then that turns into a, hey, we need to think about everybody's contribution, and we have some people that came into the environment that need some skills, so just really need your collaboration on that. It's kind of needed in the environment, and start trying to break down the barrier on that side. This falls into that category of sometimes we protect the most skilled person, even if they're a poor culture contributor, because we're just afraid of what would happen if we didn't have them. So I would say don't be afraid of those conversations, and just keep asking for partnership, collaboration, and history until you make even the tiniest bit of progress. And then don't ask for something else until you see a level of comfort and trust. And then you can build towards people opening up a little bit, but that might take you 60 days to open that one up. That's not going to happen instantly.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. We have one more question.
Right.
How do you approach a manager who is not approachable, that plays favoritism or uses profanity?
Well, that sounds fun. Doesn't that just, that sounds like a great situation there. Yeah, that is a difficult situation, and it's, I don't know that I'm going to have a perfect answer for this one. This is leading up. That's the concept that is being gotten at here, and this is being a cultural influencer upwards, which is a really, really difficult skill to master, and it takes a lot of time. So this is almost exactly the same as a leader approaching a combative employee, but reverse, because the power or the authority differential is a little bit different here. So you're still looking for incremental ways to earn some trust and to partner on certain things. And what you're working towards is a conversation that can get open enough to start talking about the impact that certain things have on you in the environment. And the trick with approaching a leader is not to say, well, when you say that word, I don't like it. It's to have a conversation to say there's just sometimes in the environment when these types of things happen, it's I'm seeing it have an impact, and I see people kind of slow down. I see people not being able to really focus a whole lot. And so when you're influencing up, sometimes you're looking for more of a environmental impact, and this one is going to take a lot of effort. I know that that's the part of this answer I can get right, is that this is not going to be a one conversation thing. This is a several conversation thing, and it is incrementally looking for the opportunity to have a conversation that would make a ding at this and move it forward. Sometimes you find out your leader is a little burnt out, and they just needed to know that somebody wanted to talk about some of these things. I'm sure some of you have come across that in your careers. Sometimes leaders get burnt out too, and they feel like every time somebody comes to them, they come to them with a problem. And so they start reacting like this, and they start just gravitating towards the people that they feel like are going to align with them like that. And that comes across definitely like favoritism. The profanity, if there's somebody else that if you have a people ops department, if you are just a private practice, you're not going to have anybody else to report that to. But if there is somebody else you can talk to about that, probably a good idea to get some other internal advice on what to do when that has crossed the line. That is a really difficult one. So like I said, I'm not going to have a perfect answer to that one. This one takes a lot of relationship building and a lot of small opportunities at the potential of a positive conversation to build enough trust to tackle the topic. Hopefully that answers that question for you. All right, Christine, do we have anything that we kind of left out there? Do we still have about 60 people logged in here?
That was the last of the questions I've seen come through the box.
All right. All right. Well, everybody, we will make this PDF available to you. Check your email boxes in about 24 to 48 hours, and you'll see a certificate come through for this presentation. And thanks for joining tonight, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening, and check out the website. Our next couple are going to be on feline lower urinary tract conditions. We've got Dr. Rebecca Tremble presenting on that. The next one will be a dual presentation from two doctors that have more acronyms than I can remember on ticks, tick-borne diseases. And the next one after that will be case studies in dermatology. So really appreciate you guys joining, and hope you have a wonderful evening. And thank you, Christine, for your help in moderating the chat box.
You're welcome. Enjoy the evening, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.